Hello everyone, this is the second part of income or losses from office chapter 3. So we're finishing chapter 3. There's so much going on in chapter 3. So this is a continuous or part B of chapter 3. When we think of a specific deductions, we're talking about deductions. Under the income tax 8(1) subsection 1 set out that the actual allowable employment expenses. Now, you're not allowed to deduct any expenses if they're not listed under this. If they're not listed under here, you're not allowed to deduct it. The expenses are available to only certain type of employment. There's conditions, some conditions has to be met in order for expenses to be deducted. Payroll withholding like CPP, EI, and income tax are not employment. Those are mandatory deduction. So CPP, EI, and income tax are mandatory deductions. They are not part of the employment expenses. That's what happens. So these are if you need a definition of it, your textbook, depending on which textbook is it, you don't even need to do a textbook. You could also go into the revenue site and you can look at these subsections, and these subsections you are allowed to, this has list of expenses you could deduct. So if you have legal expenses, you have sales expenses, traveling expense, you have a motor vehicle expenses, your dues and other expenses, performing duties. So if you're a plumber, you are part of the association. If you're CPA, you're part of the membership, you have to pay dues. You have a motor vehicles, that is also an aircraft cost, employees register pension plan contribution, and if you are in the industry of musical instrument, you have to pay for the maintenance and the insurance on these musical instruments. Going further, these are some more deductions that you have it available, and then some of them are if you're working from home. During the COVID, we were allowed to work from home, and you were allowed to deduct some of the home office expenses too. So these are some of the subsection that we needed to do. Sometimes when you do the question at the back of the chapter, you get to know which section they are. Again, you're not to memorize these subsections. You have subsections are available to you when you write your test or when you're preparing your income taxes. Or now in these days, what we have is we have softwares. What this software does is it does provide us with a lot of information, and you don't need to memorize anything. For the study purpose, we needed to know where they go, but after that, when you file somebody's taxes system, we have a system that you file it. You could use using Cantax Profile or a tax prep to file the taxes. Now, if you are a salesperson, what happens in this case? If you're a salesperson, what is the definition of a salesperson? Salesperson, if you're selling a property or negotiating a contract, then you will go under the heading of a salesperson expense. You will be a salesperson, and you are allowed to deduct the expenses under the Income Tax Act 8(1) Section F. So when you are a salesperson, you are required to pay your own expenses. If your company says that you're going to pay for your own expenses, then you are a salesperson, and you are under the Section IF. Required to ordinarily work away from the employer's place or a business. You're not sitting somewhere, you have an office somewhere else. You are doing that. You paid in part by commission, so you only generate commission income. Must not receive any tax-free allowance. Your company shouldn't pay you any allowance like automobile allowance or any other allowance. They have to sign T22, and you have to attach that to T22 with your income taxes when you file your taxes, so that you and your employer are on the same boat. So that's what you have to do. Something not right. I know I have slide top of the other slide. That's what happened, and I was trying to kind of get rid of 66. Oh no, this goes first, because when you have so many slides, it's hard to see which if I did it right. I normally look at it before I do it, but sometimes not so much. So $65, so we are going to go to 65. 66, that's where I am going. So let's go to we're still under the now we're coming into travel expense and motor vehicle expenses. So those are under the section H and H.1. There's a condition for that too. So what is the condition for that? So there's a condition for each one, right? So this one was here. What the condition was, that required to pay for your own motor vehicle, required orderly work. So the conditions are exactly the same under the salesperson. The conditions are exactly same. However, you are allowed additional expenses under the section H and HI. So that's what happens under the HI. You're allowed extra deductions. When you think of other employment expenses, they are certain expenses only allowed by if you're a contract. So if you're a full contract of an employer, required employee to pay the expenses, signed form T22 may be needed. So it's may be needed. So in other words, you should have it ready in case the CRA allowed you to do that. What are some of the other employment expenses? They are union or professional dues. So you could be working as in the company, they have a unionized, you pay the dues. Or like I said, that if you're a plumber, you have to pay for professional dues. If you're an electrician, you pay for professional dues. Or if you're a CPA, you have to pay the CPA. And you also have to pay office rent. Then you have to get that T22 undersigned that you are allowed to deduct this expense. Salary, if you needed to hire a receptionist, and then they have to tell you that you should have a receptionist. The employer, it's in your contract that you are allowed to hire a salary, and you're going to pay them. If you're going to pay them, you're allowed to deduct that as an expense. Of course, if you have an office, you're going to have a stationery, you are going to be making long distance call, you're going to be paying maintenance and operating costs to workspace in home. So this office could be at home, or you could rent it out somewhere else. Depends on the contract, or depends on your company. Now we have an automobile and aircraft expenses. These are some of the expenses that are covered under the ITA Section 8. What does that do? In 2024, the limitation on if these are automobile and aircraft expenses. So the limit of the leasing cost limited to is $1,050 per month before GST. Interest cost to purchase the vehicle restricted to $3,350 a month. So if you're paying more interest expense, then you're only allowed to deduct only as an expense $350,000. And amount upon which CCA the cost of the automobile could be anything, but under there where automobile is allowed $37,000. So the purchase of the car could be $80,000. For the Revenue Canada purposes, we are only allowed to have a $37,000 for the cost when we are calculating the when we are calculating the operating the expenses. And if your car is zero emission vehicle and they go on a different class, which is class 54. Now when we're talking about classes, this is for the CCA purposes. Later on in the chapters, you're going to learn about CCA. And when we have a CCA, it's called capital cost allowance. It is used by the Income Tax Act. If I were to think about it, depreciation was the accounting method. CCA is a method of recording capital cost allowance for the assets. That's what income tax uses. And under the classes, what you have is you have a percentage that you can write off each of the assets. So that's what happens. So every asset goes into a pool, and that every asset goes into a class, and that class has a percentage that is assigned by the CRA. Now, working from home. So sometimes you're required to work from home. So what is saying that space where individually principally perform duties. So you are working from home. What you have is you have a study area. This is your house. In the house, what we have is we have one area that we designated that it is to be used for the work as a workspace, right? You need a quiet space, and you say that my study area I'm going to use as a work. So it says space used exclusively to produce income and is used for regular or a continuous basis for the meeting client or meeting the customers. Now, if you are an employee, no employee can deduct CCA or a mortgage interest on the office space. So what you do is you're using part of the house, and let's say it's 1/4 of the house. You're allowed to deduct those expenses, and they cannot increase or create a loss. So you can deduct the expenses. So let's say my utilities was $1,000 a month. I'm just making up. 25% will relate to your home office expense. The other 75% is because you're living there. So you are only allowed to deduct what you're using it for the office space. But we are not allowed to deduct CCA on the house, or if you have a mortgage on the house and you're paying an interest, we're not allowed to deduct as an office expense. We're not allowed to mortgage interest on the office space in the home. You're not allowed to deduct it. Now, if you are a commission income, if you have a commission salesperson, your deductible expense, the rent, if you're a tenant, it's under the salesperson, you're allowed. Any utilities you pay, repair and maintenance, long distance phone charges, any property tax that you have to pay if you own the property, house insurance premium, those are deductible expenses. So those are my deductible expenses. This is for the salesperson. And then you could also have an employee. If you're an employee, your working space, you're working from home. If you're working from home, you could deduct these expenses too. Home could be rented home, or home could be your own home. So if you're renting it, the rent. If you're a tenant, your utilities, your maintenance expense, your light bulbs, cleaning material, your long distance. These are some of the expenses you are allowed to deduct it. Now, like I said that I've given an example, how you determine the employment use of an office expense. Like I said that if this is your house, you say one study area that you're using. So this whole house has 4 bedroom. You're using 1 bedroom as a employment. So it's a acceptable method to CRA is to begin with a dedicated office space. Like I say that my 1 bedroom or my study area is a dedicated office divided by finished livable space. So in this case, I have, like I said that I have 4 bedroom. This is bedroom 2, 3, 4. altogether I have 4 beds. So in this 4 bedrooms, so 1/4 is used by my home office expense, the other one is used by my family. Next is to determine the common area of home use throughout the work: the hallway, corridor, bathroom, kitchen. Of course, if I'm working from home, I am going to be using the bathrooms. I'm going to be using the kitchens. So that's what you're going to do. Determine how much time during the course of workday common areas used against the total number. So I can say that this is just an estimate. That's what it is. It's not a draw a line, but it is all about estimates. So I think I am done with this chapter. Now my next video will be for under the each chapter. I'm going to be working out the questions at the back of the chapter, and I'm going to be working out a solution with you to show you how each chapter, what we learned in each chapter, how we can apply the theory that was learned in the chapter in the questions at the back of the chapter. So watch for more videos that are going to be coming up. Thank you so much for listening to me. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for subscribing to my channel. Take care and bye for now.